Okay, so we are going to do some review problems on dividing complex numbers. So I'm going to do some of the even numbered ones here just to give you some extra practice. And again, at the top of the paper, always keep in mind I squared is always equal to -1. So if you get an I squared, replace it with a -1, okay? All right, so let's just focus on some of these even ones. Remember, you cannot have an imaginary number as a denominator. So you have to multiply it by its conjugate to get rid of it. So what gets rid of a -2i on the bottom? Multiply it by a 2i. Now if you multiply the bottom by 2i, top is exactly the same. So up top I get 1 times 2i is just 2i. -2i and a positive 2i is minus 4i squared. But remember, if I squared is always equal to -1, then again, it's really just -4 times -1. So my answer is 2i over 4, but you can simplify that. This is no different than what you did last year or the year before. The only thing is you always have the letter I. Last year you had the letter X, the letter Y, whatever. But what's that reduced to? Isn't that 2/4, 1/2? So you don't need to put the 1 in front of the I. Just simply put I over 2. All right? There's your answer there. Let's go to this one. And again, the problem is the 4i. What gets rid of a 4i? Its conjugate is -4i. So multiply top and bottom by a -4i. Okay. Up top, 7 and a -4i, that's a -28i. But on the bottom, 4i and a -4i, that's -16i squared. I squared is always equal to -1. So you don't have to keep writing this. Just know it's -16 times -1, so it's a positive 16. So it looks to me like I have -28i over 16. But you should be able to simplify that. What number goes into 28 and what number goes into 16? What's the highest number that goes into 28 and 16? 4. So how many times does 4 go into 28? That'd be 7, so that's a -7i on top. How many times does 4 go into 16? 4 times, and that's the best you can do. Did you get rid of the I on the bottom? Yes. It's okay to have an I on top. No problem there. So that's the best you can do, -7i over 4. All right? Let's skip down to number 8. So the problem is the minus 4i. So what do you use to get rid of it is a positive 4i. Same thing on top. But we're going to have to multiply that by this entire binomial. So that's distributive property. 4i times 6, that's 24i. 4i times a -6i, wouldn't that be minus 24i squared? And again, on the bottom, that's -16i squared. If you just want to go ahead and change that to positive 16, that's perfectly fine. Up top, that is a -1. So that's really 24i, -24 times a -1 is really plus 24. These two don't go together. All right, remember, 24 is the real number, 24i is the imaginary. And what's a better way to say this? -16 times -1 is just a positive 16. Now, it should be real number first, then imaginary. So right now, my answer is going to be 24 plus 24i over 16. Problem is, I know there's a number that goes into 24 and 16. What's the highest number that goes into 24 and 16? Isn't that going to be 8? Is that right? So how many times does 8 go into 24? 3 plus 3i. How many times does 8 go into 16? Over 2. All right. Now, you might see it listed this way, or you could separate these two. So if you separate them, it'll be 3 over 2 plus 3i over 2. And I've seen it listed both ways. So separated, together. All right? Only thing is, if you could simplify it separated, make sure you simplify it. You can't simplify 3 over 2, so that's the best that you can do. All right? Let's go to number 12. All right, on number 12, what gets rid of 10 plus 5i? Got to do the conjugate. 10 minus 5i. Same thing on the top. I'd put them in parentheses. Okay, distribute. 10 times 10, 100. 10 times minus 5i, minus 50i. Right now, that's the best we can do. On the bottom, you do not need to do all of FOIL because the outside and the inside will cancel. You could just do 10 times 10, that's 100. 5i and a minus 5i, that should be minus 25i squared. But if I squared is equal to negative 1, it's really a negative 25 times a negative 1. Wouldn't it be plus 25? So right now, I've got 100 minus 50i over 125. You would never see that listed. Why? What's the highest number that goes into 100, 50, and 25? Doesn't 25 go into all of them? All right, so I'm going to rewrite it here. How many times does 100, or does 25 go into 100? That'd be a 4. How many times does 25 go into 50? That'd be minus 2i. And how many times does 25 go into 125? That'd be 5 times. So there it is there. Or if you separated it, it'd be 4 over 5 minus 2i over 5. Can you simplify any of those fractions? 4/5 or 2/5? No. All right, so either way. All right. And let's skip down. Sometimes you get some really, really big numbers on some of these. And we can skip down to 16. Okay. All right, so what gets rid of a negative 5 plus 10i? Remember, only change that sign. So it'd be negative 5 minus 10i. Same thing on the top. Negative 5 minus 10i. Okay, I'm going to put them all in parentheses. Okay, so going to have to do FOIL. That's negative 25. That's minus 50i. Negative 6i and a negative 5, that's plus 30i. A negative 6i and a negative 10, that's plus 60i squared. It's really just going to turn into minus 60 because I squared is negative 1, but we'll clean that up later. You do not need to do all of FOIL on the bottom because this is difference of squares. Negative 5 times 5, that's 25. 10i and a minus 10i, shouldn't that be minus 100i squared? But if I squared is a negative 1, it's really negative 100 times a negative 1. Isn't it plus 100? So it's really 25 plus 100 on the bottom. So on the bottom, you should have 125. On the top, you should have a negative 25. What's a negative 50i and a positive 30i? Wouldn't that be minus 20i? But then don't forget this right here. 60i squared is the same as 60 times negative 1. So wouldn't that be minus 60? Okay, so who can still go with who? Can a negative 25 and a negative 60 go together? So what would that be? Negative 85 minus 20i. Remember, real number first. Over 125. Now, is there a number that goes into 85, 20, and 125? 5 does. So you're going to have to divide everything by 5. So negative 85 divided by 5, that should be a negative 17. How many times does 5 go into negative 20? So minus 4i. And how many times does 5 go into 25 or 125? Should be 25 times. So you could write it that way, or you could separate it. So if you separate it, negative 17 over 25 minus 4i over 25. And if you can simplify any of those fractions, simplify them, but you can't. So that's the best you can do. All right.